We are on message 2, and each of our topics that we're covering kind of build on the one before it. And this is our second one, focused in on communication. And we're happy to be able to be here and talk about this vital topic for marriages, for family, for all relationships. And this topic specifically, you might be here saying we're at a marriage event, but really communication is important and vital in any relationship. Whether you're talking about relationship in a marriage, relationships with people you work with at the office, relationships with your kids, with your parents. And so what we're going to be talking about this morning is something that has a very wide application. We'll be talking about it in the context of a marriage relationship, but I would say you can apply it to whatever happens to be relevant to you. Laurella and I have been doing these presentations for a number of years now. I think we're into almost to the end of our third year of doing these presentations, and it's been a burden on our hearts to be able to share ways to strengthen relationships. As we mentioned last night, marriage specifically is under attack from the devil, and it's a blessing to be able to share God's good news about relationships and marriage. I'd love to summarize all of last night's topic for those of you that missed it, but we don't have time to do that and to cover today's material. Maybe you can tell the people that are new here a little bit about our son Joshua, since he's not here.
We have one son. His name, as Adam said, is Joshua, and he's just about to turn 17. So we're in the midst of teenage parenting and enjoying stages even through the bumps. So it's interesting to learn all the different stages of life. He is very much into writing. He's started writing his own book, and so we're encouraging him that. But
She's more gracious than I am. She said we're enjoying all the stages of teenagers. We're enjoying many of the stages of teenagers. One thing that we try to remind people of, when you go through a couple weekend or seminars or messages related to that, the focus really needs to be between you and God, because we don't have the ability to change other people. And when we come to this material with the idea of I'm going to figure out how I can change her, it's not going to work. But to prayerfully ask God, what can I do in my own life to improve my relationship, needs to be the focus. So we would encourage you, if you hear something that your spouse really needs to listen to, it's not the time to elbow them and let them know, hey, this one's for you. But again, to be focusing inward on the presentation. The NAD ministerial directors, Dr. Claudio and Pam Consuegra, have been instrumental in getting us started down this journey, and we just like to take a moment and thank them for all of their support in this process. We're going to jump into our topic today. The first thing that we do is we're going to use just a little bit of humor to illustrate some of the points we're going to be talking about. Communication is something that should be so easy, and it's not. Any of you that have tried to communicate recognize that there are lots of challenges that come up in communication. We've got two videos, each is about 60 seconds long, and the first one pokes fun at guys, and I have to admit to being guilty at some of it. It's a stereotype. Not everybody fits into all stereotypes, but don't worry, the second video clip pokes fun at the ladies a little bit in their listening styles. And then from there, we're going to go into some biblical and some scientific communication styles. So here's the first video clip that's going to poke fun at the men just a little bit.
Men, how many times has this happened to you?
To me. You know, our babies sleep really, really good.
Or this.
Make sure Timmy wears the blue shirt. If he doesn't.
Or even this.
And for my birthday, which is next month, I'd really like some of this.
Do you have trouble listening or retaining information from your wife? You could be suffering from spousal selective listening, or SSL. With SSL, valuable input is intercepted or scrambled before it reaches the critical learning center of the man brain. Virtually anything can trigger it, like sports, food, even shiny objects with buttons. Fortunately, there is help with Heritol. Containing a rare root with an exotic name, Heritol helps men focus and listen to valuable female input, even pick up on those subtle hints.
These are exactly the earrings I wanted. How did you know?
Thanks, Heritol. Now I can hear it all.
Heritol has not been tested or approved by any regulatory agency. Side effects with Heritol include minor to severe headaches and spontaneous combustion. Use caution when using Heritol near mothers-in-law, as you may hear hurtful comments that would have previously been ignored. Heritol is an enhancement drug. Do not use around children or clusters of talkative old blue-haired women. If focused listening lasts longer than 4 hours, consult your doctor immediately before your wife assumes this is a new standard in your relationship. Men with wives who are nursing or pregnant should not take this product. Heritol, the preferred selection or solution for selective hearing.
I think you see some of the humor in that, and I will poke fun at the ladies just a little bit.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you.
Come on, if you would just...
Don't.
Communication, we can have a lot of fun with that, but the truth is communication can be very, very challenging. And when you're in a relationship where communication is not working well, there's nothing worse than that. When you're living with somebody and you just don't know how to process through what's taking place. This morning, we're going to look at some proven ways to help clarify and improve communication skills.
Definitely, communication is confusing and challenging, from the way we say something or how we say it to how it's heard from the other person, and what we mean when we say it and how they interpret it. So we're going to take a look, like Adam said, at what we can do to help us with our communication. Here in James chapter 1, verse 19, it says, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath." And I think this is a good place for us to start, to remember that we want to listen, to understand, and not get our differences, to not let our differences make it hard for us to understand one another. Here in Messages to Young People, page 328, it says, "How strong would we become if our words were of such an order that we would not be ashamed to meet the record of them in the day of judgment? How different will they appear in the day of God from what they seem when we utter them?" It's easy to want to answer quickly, to defend ourselves when we feel like we've been attacked. But we want to take that step back and remember our words are important. What we say has meaning, has impact on the other person and on our relationships. So we want to keep that focus in mind, that the person we're talking to is also a child of God, and that we want to be kind and respectful in our speaking to one another.
This morning we're going to be talking about, ultimately where we're going with this is we're going to be talking about 10 keys to communication. But before we get there, we want to focus in on two relationship-changing skills. Some of these skills will be new to you. Some of you will have heard this kind of material before, but it's something that when you can grasp, understand, and use this, can drastically change the way that you communicate. The first skill is assertiveness, and the second skill is active listening. Much of the material that we're going to be sharing in this session has come from the Prepare Enrich material. Many pastors, myself included, have been trained in this and use it for marriage counseling or pre-marriage counseling. And I have been blessed as I have shared this with couples and watched them implement this material and the difference that it's made in their lives. First, we'll deal with assertiveness.
And we'd like to define that this morning as the ability to express your feelings and ask for what you need and want. Assertiveness is a very valuable communication skill, but unfortunately it's gotten a bad rap sometimes. We talk negatively about assertive people as they're overbearing or selfish, but in reality, when used appropriately, assertiveness is a very good communication tool. We might be afraid, reasons that it might have gotten a bad rap is we might be afraid that the other person will be hurt by what we say, or that they'll think we're being selfish. But again, we want to remember that even though we might not want to admit it, the other person can't really read our minds. We might want them to, they should just know, right? But it doesn't work that way. So in order to help each other know what our needs and wants are, we have to be able to express them in a kind and respectful way. So we're going to look at what assertiveness might look like. Now this probably isn't a good example. I don't know if we can get that a little bigger on the screen to have that the only one there, but we have Hagar and Helga here, and Hagar notices Helga sitting there kind of with her nose in the air with maybe something's going on, so he asks, "What are you mad about?" And she just yells right back at him, "Everything." Now, she might be being kind of assertive, but this really isn't a helpful way to express what you need and want. As you see there, it kind of knocks him over, and he says, could you be a little more specific? So instead of just blasting him, everything's bothering me or everything's wrong, to take that step back and explain what it is that's going on. One of the best ways to practice assertiveness is to use I statements. Some of us have probably heard this phrase before, but in I statements, we talk about how we are feeling and not casting blame on the other person. We want to communicate facts instead of pointing the finger. So we're stating how we feel when something happens and what it is that we need in this situation. So here's an example. I feel scared when you don't let me know you're coming home late because I'm afraid you've been in an accident and are hurt. It would help me not to worry if you would send me a quick text letting me know you'll be late. So you'll notice the focus is on I feel scared. You're not pointing the finger, blaming them. You're making me feel scared. You're just owning your own feelings. I feel scared when this happens. So that's very intentional because we want to make sure the focus is on how we are feeling and experiencing things.
And I think that's a valid point, because when you're in a conversation, even if it's the other person's fault, if you come at them and you point the finger, you did this or you did that or why did you do this, their automatic reaction is defense. And as soon as they become defensive, you have put up a huge roadblock or barrier to solving whatever it is you're wanting to talk about. So the I statements, taking it all on yourself as you're trying to start this conversation.
And then at the end, it ends with why it is you're feeling that way, and then what it is you need. If you could send me a text, just say, "Hey, I'm running late," then that lets that person know, I'm okay, I'm going to be late, but I'll be there. As Adam was talking about, when we point the finger, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid the you statements because they're accusatory, and as he said, it puts you on the defensive. You don't then want to work together to find a solution to the issue that's being brought up. You want to defend your actions, and then you're in a position of not wanting to work together. It's hard when you have strong feelings about something to remember to frame them in this way, but it definitely helps to bring the tension down, and it keeps the door of communication open to be able to work through a solution to the issue that's at hand. Here's another example of assertiveness. I'm feeling out of balance. While I love spending time with you, I also want to spend time with my friends. I would like us to find some time to talk about this. So again, starting with how I am feeling about it and what I'm struggling with, and then at the end, what I'm needing, a time to talk about it. So it lays it out there, what's going on, but it's from my own perspective and not a blaming perspective. And one final example here. I want to take a ski vacation next winter, but I know you like to go to the beach. I'm feeling confused about what choice we should make. Again, my perspective, and the desire, putting out the desire to work together to find a solution. Before moving on to active listening, I'd like to take a look at some benefits of assertiveness. So here we have a list. I think we can see them, yes. Assertiveness allows sharing of feelings, needs, and wants. It avoids making your spouse feel attacked. It keeps the doors of communication open and enables your spouse to begin to meet your needs. Once we know what it is that the other person is needing, it's much easier for us to be able to meet that need. If they just leave it to our imagination or never help us to understand, then we don't know how best to meet their needs. So assertiveness on both parts actually is very healthy in relationships, because that way both partners can know what it is the other one needs.
The second skill that we want to talk about after active listening is, after assertiveness is active listening. Assertiveness is the skill of making sure that people can understand you. Active listening is the skill of making sure that people know that they've been heard. I was taught the skill of active listening in college by a professor who was not good at active listening, and I found that quite ironic. And the skill is an easy one to practice, but I have found that even being trained in it, using it in my professional life a lot, that if I don't focus on it in my relationship with my wife, I don't always do a good job of listening. Probably not nearly as good as I would like to do. Active listening is defined as the ability to let your partner know you understand them by restating their message. This professor, I saw him years later after college, and I went up to him. It was a Sabbath morning, and we were discussing with each other, where have you been? It's been a long time since we've seen each other. But when I was engaged with him in the conversation, he was doing anything but paying attention to me. And I could tell because his eyes were everywhere. They were darting all over the place in his hand motions and his body language, and he was fidgety. And what I'm really saying by all of this is we know when somebody's actually listening to us or not. And it's pretty easy to tell most of the time if they're engaged with us. Eye contact is a huge thing. And if you don't have somebody's eye contact when you're talking to them, probably you don't have their attention. Now, there's some exceptions to that. If your head is under the sink trying to fix the plumbing, maybe they're still paying attention. But good communication depends on good listening. Active listening, as we defined it up on the screen, the ability to let your partner know you understand them by restating the message. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 27 says, "He who has knowledge spares his words, and a man of understanding is of a calm spirit." I should put the quote in here. I don't remember who said it, but they said, if I could remember who it was, said that it's better to keep your mouth shut and let people think that you are foolish than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And I think that there is some wisdom in that in relationships. If we would spend a little bit more time listening. Somebody else has said God has given us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Maybe we should listen twice as much as we talk. I think most of us actually talk twice as much as we listen. And so the skill of active listening that we're about to get in defines how it is that we can be better listeners. I don't know if this is scientifically provable, but I liked this quote. We hear only half of what is said to us, understand only half of that, believe only half of that, and remember only half of that. That's conceivable. I think that we're not very good at listening. Listening is something, as I mentioned with the professor I was talking about, that is a whole body activity. It requires your eyes and your ears and your mouth and your body, your hands, your feet, the way your whole body is. In fact, when you really want to tell somebody that you're listening to them, if you are able to sit in a chair and sit much like you're sitting right now here in church, with your feet on the ground, your knees up, and your body pointed toward them, looking in the eye, that is one of the best positions to communicate. I am paying attention to what it is that you have to say. I would actually challenge you to experiment sometime in church or at a public meeting. You can a little bit control what the speaker will do with your body language. And by that, as a public speaker, what public speakers do is they look for eye contact. And if you're looking down at your phone or taking notes, and there's nothing wrong with taking notes, but if your eye contact isn't there, the speaker's not going to be as likely to listen to you. To look at you. And so if you are in a meeting and you keep your head down and watch where the speaker's head goes, you'll notice that it doesn't come to you very much. But then if you bring your head up and open your eyes wide and stare right at their eyes, you'll see that they start looking at you a whole lot more frequently. And I don't know that you want to make a game out of this, but I suppose you could get 8 people around the room and tell them when they have their eyes open so you can watch where the speaker's going. But it's human nature. Speakers don't think about it. When you're up front presenting, you're looking for a connection, for contact. And we do that through our eyes. And that's much the way it happens in communication with a spouse or a child or a loved one. Here we have this comic that says, your body language suggests you've lost interest, as he's toppled over on the desk lying there with his face. And I think she's probably right. I think he's lost interest. Here we have a comic, and this is about Flo and Andy. And Flo is getting ready to leave. She's putting her jacket on, and she's headed out the door. And then she stops, and she remembers, I should probably tell my husband that I'm leaving. And she calls to him, and there he is. He's behind the newspaper, and she says, I'm going around to my mother's. Are you listening? And he responds and says, yes. And then she says, I'll be gone for a couple of hours. Are you sure you're listening? He responds again, yes, and then she leaves, heads off to her mother's. He's there reading his paper, and then finally he puts his paper down, and he says, Flo, are you in the kitchen? Could you bring me a cup of tea? They both could have done a lot of things better in that scenario. Clearly, she never actually had his attention. She would have been better off if she would have waited until she knew she had his attention and eye contact. He would have been better off had he been respectful to her and put the paper down so that he could have made eye contact with her. And we've recognized that in our relationship. If my wife has got her head in the dishwasher or the washing machine, or I'm in the middle of an email or something, if we don't pull ourselves away from that and physically connect with each other, we don't actually know if we've got each other's attention when we're communicating. Much of the time, we're not perfect at it, but much of the time, if my wife comes into my office, I will try to pull myself away from what I'm doing, turn in my chair and look at her so that she's got my attention. And the flip side is true. She frequently will come in, and until I do that, she won't start talking to me, which is polite on both ends. It's polite for me to pull away and give her time, and polite for her to not start giving me information while I'm in the midst of something else. Men are not this simple, but I will make a joke about men, with the laser focus that we can't multitask and do multiple things at once. Eye contact.
I think multitasking is a myth anyway.
I think multitasking is a myth as well. Active listening involves listening attentively without interruption and restating what was heard. So we've defined active listening. A big part of active listening is this restating. When I was in college and they would go through this class and teach it, you could always tell the students that had just been in the class about active listening, because they would walk around campus for a couple of days, somebody would tell them something, and then they would restate it back to them. They would say something very clinical like, "So what I hear you saying is," and then they would repeat it back. It actually seems a little bit unnatural the first couple times you do it, but after you get used to it, it's a very useful and natural skill. In active listening, the listener verbally feeds back what he or she hears in order to clarify that the message has been accurately received and interpreted. Here we have a couple, they're sitting with the marriage counselor, they're on the couch, and the counselor asks, how have things been since last week? And the wife says, the husband says, "Well, we're talking." The counselor says, "That's splendid." And the husband says, "Well, talking was never the problem." And the wife says, "Yeah, neither of us ever gets around to listening." The counselor says, "Well, of course, talking is only part of the solution, isn't it? You also have to listen to one another." And then the wife says, "Do you hear what the doctor said? It's all pointless unless you listen to me." Even though I'm not sure she completely got the point, she is right that speaking is pretty much pointless unless there's somebody to listen. So you need to speak in a way that you can be heard, and you also need to listen in such a way that the speaker knows that they are being heard. So with assertiveness, and Laurella gave this example a few minutes ago, you might say something like, this is the I statement, "I'm feeling out of balance. Well, I love spending time with you. I also want to spend time with my friends. I would like for us to find some time to talk about this." That's the assertive statement. She's not blaming, she's not pushing, but she's just I. And so maybe as an active listener, I would repeat back to her, and it could sound something like this. Thank you. I heard you say you are out of balance and enjoy spending time together, but you also need more time with your friends, and you want to plan a time to talk about this. One of the keys with feedback, with active listening, is that we usually skip this step because we go right to judgment. We decide whether we like or dislike what was said. But with active listening, what you are doing is making sure that you understand before you judge. And so you repeat back what you think you've heard. You don't have to like what you think you heard. You don't have to agree with what you think you heard. You don't have to be happy about it. But before you get into a fight, you want to make sure you understood what was said. Maybe you totally misunderstood it. So you repeat back to the other person what you think you said. If they come back and say, "Yeah, that's exactly what I said," then you know what the rest of the discussion is going to be about. If they say, "No, that's not what I said at all," it gives them a chance to clarify what it is that was being said. Another example, I want to take a ski vacation next winter, but I know that you like to go to the beach. And this is my wife, she likes to go to the beach. I'm feeling confused about what choice we should make. The active listener could restate it, could push this information back and say, "If I understand what you said, you are concerned because you want to go skiing next winter, but you think I would rather go to the beach. Is this correct?" Again, if she says, "Yeah, that's correct," then you know the conversation you're having. But if she said, "No, that's not correct at all I said is I wanted to go to Burger King," then you know you really missed what was being said. Proverbs 18:13 says, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him." Let me read that one again. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him. Now we've covered active listening, assertiveness and active listening. Now we want to transition into 10 communication skills that can increase intimacy, increase the strength of a relationship. If you're being challenged in communication with your children, if you're being challenged in communication with your parents or with your spouse or with your coworkers, these are 10 communication skills that can help you in that communication process.
Active listening and assertiveness are part of this list of 10. So we're going to dive in here with skill number 1.
Skill number 1 is to give full attention to your partner when talking. And we've already talked a little bit about that. Turning your phone off, shutting off the television, making eye contact. Those are all things that are important. If you're wanting to communicate, you need to give full attention. If my wife wants to come and talk to me while I'm in the middle of a Vikings-Packers game, she needs to make sure that I'm actually looking at her and not at the football game. And I have a responsibility there too. Today, the big thing is the phone. You go to a restaurant and you see, oh, it's so nice to see this family out together at the restaurant. And then you see that they're all actually in their phones. They could have done that at home. Trying to take away those distractions, making sure that you're telling the person you're talking to that they're important by giving them your full attention. So skill number 1, give full attention to your partner when talking.
Skill number 2 is focus on the good qualities in each other and praise each other often. When we fall into the trap of being negative with each other, we put up those barriers in the relationship and we don't keep those doors of communication open, because when you're attacked or criticized, it doesn't make you have good feelings about wanting to communicate and improve things. But again, here, skill number 2, we want to focus on the positive and praise each other. Praise is sometimes challenging because we've often been told that we don't want to build up pride or vanity, so we have shied away sometimes from praise. But here in this context, it's not a prideful praising. It's just an acknowledging of the value that you find in that person and the good qualities that you see in them. And that, of course, will develop those good feelings between each other. When you know that you like each other, you want to work together more than if you're being criticized and you feel like they don't like you.
Last night we talked about a concept of a love bank, that when you do good things for somebody you care about, you're making deposits into their life. When you're praising somebody, you're making deposits into their life, and they feel better about the relationship, better about you, everything you just said. Skill number 3, we spent a lot of time already this morning on this. I'll just summarize it. It's be assertive. Share your thoughts, feelings, and needs. And a good way to be assertive without being critical is to use I statements rather than you statements. So skill number 3 is assertiveness.
Skill number 4 is avoid criticism. And similar to what we said before, how many of us like to be criticized? That doesn't really feel good, right? Kind of makes you pull back and not be open to working things out together. So criticism shuts down communication instead of keeping it open and helping us to want to work together.
I've never had anybody come into my office and say, my spouse is so amazing, they never miss an opportunity to criticize me. Now, I've had similar statements, but it was in the negative, not in the positive. I don't know that any of us enjoy criticism.
No, it builds that wall. We talked some last night about bricks that we build that prevent us from working together. And criticism is one of those bricks that builds that wall that keeps us from communicating.
Number 5, if you must criticize, balance it with many positive comments. This goes back to that love bank concept. There are times, hopefully not many, there are times where criticism is necessary. But if you're going to criticize, that person's love bank needs to be filled because you're about to make a withdrawal from it. If you go to make a withdrawal from somebody's love bank who is empty, the check is going to bounce. That's not going to work well. So that goes back to skill number 2, where you're making lots and lots and lots of positive comments for that person. I've read different studies, and I don't know how they figure these things out or what's true, but I've heard people say for every negative comment, you need 2 positive comments. And I've read, well, it needs to be 8 positive comments for every negative. I've heard other people say it's way more than that. Here in our society in the United States, I think it's pretty high. We don't do well with negative comments or criticism. And so in a relationship where you care, you need to really lay on, genuinely, you need to lay on the positive comments, the affirmation, because when a time comes where you may need to be negative, that's what's going to set the ground for that to be possible. So skill 5, if you must criticize, balance it with many positive comments.
And I would jump in here and say, criticize, the word criticize has a negative connotation, of course. So we want to make sure we're using those I statements, being assertive in a respectful way when we do have to bring up issues that could be classified as criticism. So it's not, we're not saying, you can blast somebody, of course, but with that criticism, we want to do it in a constructive, respectful manner.
Yes, you're not making deposits into the love bank so that you can make withdrawals. That's not the purpose of it.
Skill number 6 is listen to understand, not judge. And that is part of the active listening that we talked about earlier. If we go into a situation and we think we already know the answer to what's going on, we've shut ourselves off from actually listening to understand. We think we already know what the problem is, we think we already know what the answer is, so we're not really listening to hear what they're communicating to us.
I'll interject here at the risk of taking some of your notes. I know that you're guilty of this because this is human nature. There are times when you're in communication with somebody, and instead of listening to them, you find yourself formulating what you want to say. And then, if they're still talking, you wonder how long until they stop talking so I can say what it is that I'm ready to say. And that entire time you're doing that, it's evidence you're not really listening to them. And I see a lot of smiles and head shaking. You've been there too. I'm not the only one that's done that. And you start wondering, why did I talk so long? When do I get to say what I want to say? But that's not really listening to understand. You've already made a judgment.
No, but it's easy to want to do that because we want to defend ourselves. We want to have our voice heard as well. But what we're talking about here is we want to take a step back from that. We want to be intentional about not placing our preconceived ideas on what's happening and really taking in what the other person is communicating, putting yourself in their shoes, thinking, how would I feel if this was happening to me or if this is how I was experiencing the situation? Because until we can really understand where they're coming from, we can't work together to meet the needs between the two of us. So again, it's an intentional stepping back, taking my preconceived ideas off the table so that I can understand what he is saying and then work together. Oh, I didn't realize that's how you were feeling. If we place our judgment or preconceived idea on it, we may not hear what it is really that they're saying. So we might discover something that we didn't know when we can truly listen.
Mm-hmm. Skill number 7, and I'm going to just touch this one briefly because we've already spent a bunch of time this morning on this one, and it's active listening. So use active listening. Summarize your partner's comments before sharing your own reactions or feelings. And the bulk of the beginning of the presentation was on active listening. So that's skill number 7.
Skill number 8, avoid blaming each other and work together for a solution. What does the blame game do? If you're blamed for something that you didn't do, what does that make you feel inside? That's unfair. Why are they blaming me for this? I didn't do that. And then you get on the defensive and you're not wanting to work together with them. You're wanting to defend yourself and clear your name. So when we blame one another, we block communication. We shut it down, make it hard to progress and find a solution.
And I would say with that, the challenge with avoiding blame is usually it's their fault, right? But if you are in a relationship where you want to work together for a mutual solution to make things better, if you start with blame, it's going to do exactly what Laurella just said. It's going to make it hard to get what you really want, which is a solution to the issue. So even if it is their fault, telling them that usually isn't going to be part of the solution.
And again, here you can use those I statements to help them understand what's going on. Did we skip 9? No.
Nope. Skill number 9 is a skill, it says use the 10-step approach for problems that come up again and again. Use the 10 steps for resolving couple conflict. The challenge with this one right here is that we're in a 5-part seminar, and the 10 steps for couple conflict is coming in a different part. So step number 9 of these skills here is something we haven't taught you yet and will be coming in a later session. But there is a good process to go through when resolving conflict, and we'll be covering that later in one of our sessions. Skill number 10.
Seek counseling. If you are not able to resolve issues, seek counseling before they become more serious. There are times when we need help outside of ourselves. In the business world or our personal lives, sometimes we call these mentors or life coaches. And I would encourage us to consider that as an option in our marriage relationship as well. In the past, there's been a stigma on receiving marriage counseling or family counseling. We've somehow gotten the idea that we should be able to fix ourselves or do it ourselves without outside help. And it is challenging. I understand it is challenging to want to do that, to seek outside help and admit we need help. We don't know how to solve this. But just as you would in a sports team to get a coach to help you, just as you would in your business life to get a mentor to help you, they've been there before. They have good information. So marriage and family counselors also have good information for us to help us in our relationships. So if this is something that you feel the need for, I encourage you to do so, because they have education and skills that they can help us with if there are those situations or issues in our relationship that we really just aren't able to make progress in. So if you find yourself in that space needing some help, I encourage you to seek out a Christian counselor or talk with your pastor to get you some help navigating those things.
We're young and people teach us how to eat. We get older, people teach us how to dress, how to tie our shoes, how to drive cars, how to fix cars, how credit cards work. Why should it be any different for learning how to communicate? We need some guidance, some help in that.
Mm-hmm.
So the homework that I give with this, and I think it's at the bottom of the sheet, and we're gonna wrap this up now, is that I think that it is important for couples to individually create a wish list. And this is very, very hard for some couples because some of you are not accustomed to making I statements or saying what it is that you want. But our encouragement is that you make a wish list of 3 things that you would like more of or less of in a relationship. And for the purpose of homework, you can go serious with it or you can be funny. Either way is okay for practice. I could put on that list, my dear, I would love more apple pie in our relationship. And that is an I statement where I've said what I would like and I have put it out there. And I make that list of 3 things. I do it separately. She does it separately. And you want to make sure you're making good I statements when you're making that wish list. So you're using the assertive skills. And then when it comes time to share that list with your partner, you're going to say those assertive statements. I would like to have more apple pie in our relationship. Sorry, what?
I think you want to be back one slide here.
No, I want to be here.
Okay.
When you make that list and you share that list, you want to assertively say it. I want to have more apple pie in the relationship, and then your spouse will have a chance to mirror back to you that list. Now, we're going to be sharing other skills in future seminars, but this is really just practicing making 3 assertive statements and having your spouse reflect those 3 assertive statements back to you. Now, you might find that you've got some hanging issues there if your spouse has said something like, I really would like to find a way for us to spend less money together. Well, your spouse can mirror that back and say, well, it sounds like you would like to discuss us spending less money. And that's as far as we've gone and what we've shared with you. So you've got something that's hanging there. But our next session will deal with how to go through those conflicts. So the homework is practicing assertiveness and reflective listening, the listening skills. I want to close with this Bible verse this morning, Psalm 19:14. And I think this should be all of our prayer in communication. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. In communication, there are some times where things get heated. Things are said that shouldn't be said. Hurt is caused. And I think that if we can be proactive about our communication, use these skills that we've talked about, and have this as the prayer in our heart when we're having conversation, that a lot more productive communication can happen and a lot less pain. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Let's bow our heads and we will close this session. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this Sabbath, that we can be here in this beautiful church with this beautiful church family. As we have discussed communication, Lord, we know that all relationships, the even idea of relationship has come from you, that you are the creator of relationships. Lord, I ask that we would take an opportunity to strengthen our relationships for you, to bring glory and honor to you. I ask for a blessing on each relationship that is represented here today, and I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, and we look forward to journeying with you as this weekend continues.